This lecture is a very brief overview of some big ideas in the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche. And to begin, I think it might be helpful to pick up from where we left off with our lecture on Karl Marx. So I've been talking about this whole idea of building systems in philosophy, whether we're talking about starting with metaphysics and then building an epistemology and ethics on top of that, or whether we should start with epistemology as was introduced in the Enlightenment, or even whether we should start with ethics and political philosophy to kind of be our grid for how we understand every other institution of philosophy. And the whole idea with these various approaches to philosophy is the idea that we have to build some sort of system to understand the world around us. For Nietzsche, what makes him a very interesting philosopher is that he rejects all of this. He argues that there is no formal system because system building assumes that we have at hand some self-evident truths on which to build. And so what makes Nietzsche unique is he wants to get rid of all of this. And he wants to start with nothing that's self-evident. And so this makes him a very fun and interesting philosopher. One of his more famous works is a work called On the Birth of Tragedy. And he really is asking a question in that work on why we should agree with Socrates concerning the reasonableness of reality. So Socrates assumed that there was a truth. He didn't admit to knowing what the truth is. But at least there's some truth out there that we can know, and we can know it through rational reflection. Nietzsche suspects that maybe that whole project got off on the wrong foot because it assumes the reasonableness of reality. It assumes even a reasonableness of moral reflection and thought. Maybe life is just absurd, as is suggested in many of the Greek tragedies. And he specifically has in mind the Greek gods of Apollo and Dionysus. Dionysus being a god who really introduces a lot of chaos, and maybe that's the way the world actually is. Maybe the world is chaotic and there is no system of thought that we can build. When he looks at the history of the West, he sees it not as a story of triumph, but actually a story of weakness and decadence. And in fact, he would give a critique to Marx and Hegel on this account, where they see as history progressing towards some sort of better end. He sees it actually as being moving towards more of destruction and weakness, and he doesn't see the history of West as being triumph at all. Now, a lot of this centers on his idea that God is dead. Now, this quote shows up in sort of a parable that he writes about a madman who runs into the tavern and he starts shouting to everyone in the tavern that God is dead, God is dead, God is dead, and everyone looks at him as though he's crazy. And they ask him, oh, well, God is dead, well, where did he go? Did you lose him? And the madman responds to the people who are making fun of him, where has God gone? I shall tell you, we have killed him, you and I. We are his murderers. But how have we done this? How are we able to drink up the sea? Who gave us the sponge to wipe away the entire horizon? What did we do when we unchained the earth from its sun? Whither is it moving now? Whither are we moving now? Away from all suns. Are we not perpetually falling? Backward, sideward, forward, in all directions. Is there any up or down left? Are we not straying as through an infinite nothing? Do we not feel the breath of empty space? Has it not become colder? This is a powerful paragraph from Nietzsche, but it's really one where he is reflecting on the question of really whether the death of God is a good thing or a bad thing. Now, on the one hand, the death of God can be a bad thing. Now, Nietzsche is an atheist, and it's important to realize that He's not somebody that believes in God. When he says that God is dead, he thinks this is actually what has happened. The conclusion of Western philosophy has been the death of God. But what makes it a bad thing for him is that it could lead to nihilism, to the idea that there is no meaning in life. When we enchained society from the sun that was holding everything, all the planets together in orbit, when we unchain society from the sun, and the sun is God, then everything moves into chaos. There's no order to society anymore. There's no order to the cosmos. There's no up or down left. Everything is meaningless. And so this is a tragic aspect of God being dead. But he also argues that it could be a good thing because we can move from a life-denying ethic to really a life-affirming philosophy. And this is what Nietzsche is trying to get us to do. Now, to understand what he means by leaving behind a life-denying ethic, it's important to understand the distinction that Nietzsche makes between master morality versus slave morality. Now, when he's talking about the death of God, and he's saying that there's no up or down left, have things become colder, and he has this fear of moving into just complete nihilism. It is important to realize that Nietzsche did argue that there are no objective moral values. There are no objective standards by which we can determine what's right and wrong. And this, I would argue, even goes into his understanding of all of philosophy. So you could consider Nietzsche to be sort of a relativist. There is no objective reality out there by which we can judge whether or not our ideas are true or false. And so if we think back to Kant's philosophy, and he wants to separate the world between the noumenal and the phenomenal world, well, what Nietzsche does is he just gets rid of the nominal world. All we have is the phenomenal world, and therefore there are no objective moral values. And so how do we do morality then? Well, on the one hand, we could set up sort of a master morality. This is where you divide the world between good and bad people. Now, the people who are good are those who are in power, who have influence. And those who are bad are those who are weak and don't have power and don't have influence. Now, we might see this as being kind of a bad way to set up morality, but Nietzsche wants us to think about this in a way that's actually somewhat favorable. Because if you think about what is considered good on this master morality, you would be thinking of things like strength and courage and sense of honor and confidence and self-assertiveness. These would all be good character attributes that you want to develop in your own life so that you can be successful. Bad, on the other hand, are things like weakness, being sickly, being cowardly, being dishonorable, poverty, meek, being gentle. These are all things that don't contribute to success, and therefore on a master morality system, we should consider these bad. Master morality places little value, therefore, on having pity or compassion, because what you're doing is you're trying to lift up people who are behaving in bad ways. That's not the way to be kind on a master system of morality. Rather, you want to encourage people to be strong, pick themselves up. Don't just be pitiful and weak. Be strong, be self-assertive. That is what we're striving for in a master morality. A slave morality, on the other hand, divides the world between good people and evil people. And this is different. So the word evil now is, or the word bad is replaced with the word evil. And this is something where he says on a slave system of morality, slaves really want to have the powers. Those who are weak want to be in places of privilege and power, but they're just too weak to oppose the master. And so what a slave system of morality tries to do is they try to take revenge in thought. So they'll say things like, if you are an oppressive master, then you are evil. And they want to make the master feel bad for succeeding. This is a slave system of morality. And Nietzsche argues that the worst system of this type of ethic that has ever been created is the Judeo-Christian approach to this ethics. Because this is a system that elevates the person of Jesus to having the highest status. And Jesus said things like, if you want to be great among you, become a slave. Nietzsche found this to be completely unethical, to teach people that they should become slaves and servants, that the greatest among you are those who sacrifice themselves. And this is why he considers this a self-denying ethic. It's one that actually elevates weak attributes and doesn't elevate the powerful attributes. And it just really, for him, shifts and puts ethics on its head. And this is not what we ought to be promoting as a society. Instead, what we ought to promote is the idea of the superperson or the superman, according to Nietzsche. Moral values, he argues, should work with our nature and not against our nature. And this is the problem with the slave morality, is it's trying to get people to go against what they know, at least he argues, what they know to be true. You know it's not a good place to be poor. And so why would you say that you're actually blessed when you're poor? That doesn't make any sense. That goes against our nature. Rather, what we want to say to people is strive for greatness, strive for freedom. This is what it means to live the good life. And so Nietzsche, in his Death of God, says this can be a bad thing. It can lead to nihilism. But for the super person, for the courageous person, you can realize this is actually an opportunity for freedom. And this is an opportunity to tell people to strive for greatness. And if we encourage people to do that, then the individual will be better off for it.